Hola! I just got done teaching, and it was pretty crazy. I've been trying to teach more. I've been trying to work more to up my income because I've been feeling a little better recently. It's been pushing my limits, though. It's been hard to write at the same time, although I did just finish off the fourth Harry Potter book, and of course I'm reading a bunch of other stuff, so the reading ends up being some sort of weird, natural, compulsive priority. And so the writing's fallen off partially because of that, but partially because of major other issues. I read the blog post, what did I call it? Writer's block is a life problem, or an experiential inquiry into the nature of writer's block, which was cool, which was very, very interesting. I liked it. But anyways, I've been working the split shift, so it's 5 to 8 in the morning and 8 to 11 at night. So theoretically, I would get a little over 40 hours, 42 hours. In actuality, I'm getting somewhere in the 30s. I'm not sure exactly where, because you sign up kind of part-time and then they have to schedule students, but then I don't get paid if students aren't scheduled through the big company. The small company has not been arranging as many students, so I'm working some days for them, but mostly switching over to the big company. But you have to sign up for these hours like 10 days in advance, and they have like 5,000 teachers, somewhere around there, so you have to jump on the opportunity when it comes. And we've changed up some of my chiropractic adjustment recently. So I was doing, Helena Beekman was adjusting me on Tuesday and Thursday, who does the skull adjustment and everything, and she's the one that I've had a lot of success with, adjusting my cervical spine. And her husband, they run it as a husband-wife thing, which is pretty cool. He is now adjusting me on Monday. So him on Monday, her on Thursday. And just to change it up, because I feel like I had plateaued a little bit, and I'm trying out some other stuff. I'm trying out some different exercises at home. I've always been doing that, always been trying different stuff, and I've had some ups and downs, some successes and some major failures with that. And overall, it seems to be increasing, helping, I think, but that just means I basically have to fill up my time and my energy with trying to make more money to pay the bills. I have 3 months to go on one medical payment that's $60 a month, so that would be nice. It seems like a small amount of money, but $60 a month would definitely help. So that'll be cool. And the split shift is really weird because, so 5 to 8 in the morning and then 8 to 11 at night, that only allows you the short amount of time to sleep in between, but as long as I sleep during the day, it should be fine. It's just actually sleeping during the day, because right in the middle of the day it feels kind of weird to take a several hour nap, essentially. But I think it'll work out fine, I believe. Technically, I could pick up a few more hours on the weekend, night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They have like 1 to 4 a.m. shifts, but so it'd be like a weekend third shift schedule with a split shift during the week, which I used to do schedules like that, but I don't think I could physically handle it anymore. Then I'd have mental deterioration in my mental performance. It's exactly what happens, and then physically too. And then your inability to solve problems comes at the same time. It's a whole vortex. I have my Advanced Communicator Gold seminar scheduled. It's a 1-hour seminar on Tuesday, February the 13th from 6 to 7 p.m. at the Book Nook and Java Shop, which should be cool. I'm doing it on meetings. It has to be on meetings to meet the parameters of the event that you're qualifying for Advanced Communicator Gold. But I'm doing some unique material. I've been writing down notes here, and I've made it nice and general and open and applicable to the public. Look at the way they're organized. Pretty chaotic. But it's a mix of information I've culled from people, different ideas. Some I've applied in a new context, and at least one of the things I think I've invented. So it's kind of cool. It should be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how many people show up. I think I've had 3 officially confirm, and I've had a few officially say they can't come. But that'll be my Advanced Communicator Gold, which is not technically the highest level in Toastmasters, but it's the highest speaking level, which was my goal when I started. My goal was to actually get better at speaking, but then you had to kind of choose this hierarchy of competence program that you were going to work through, and I just decided I want to do the speaking one. So that'll be it. I've actually done enough stuff to qualify for it and the level above it, but I haven't recorded it all officially. So that comes down to my conscientiousness and orderliness, and which I'm really low on. I'm actually in the 0th percentile. You can't get lower, which is pretty crazy. And talking about all of that, I was going to talk about the Chinese students. That's because this was crazy. So I had some really odd students stack up over the last like 2.5 hours. And several of them were really cool. It was an interesting session. Now, I don't have as much flexibility with this company, which is unfortunate. Kind of just like a kid pops up, you don't know what kid it's going to be, and like some material pops up, and you don't know what the material is going to be. And then it's playing a lot of improv, playing a lot of jazz, which I do really well with, I do fine with, so it works out pretty good, actually. It's a pretty good fit, but I can't adjust the material very well. And technically I can show my screen, but I have to run another program and then connect the two to try to show my screen, and then I can't write on or interact with my screen, and neither can they at that point, and then I can't see their face and they can't see my face, so it's not ideal. Whereas the smaller company works really good. They use a program called Zoom.us, and that works great. They haven't designed their own program. Dada designed their own program, but it doesn't work as good for that, but they keep it proprietary, which helps them, and it keeps it internal. So I see why they do it, but it just doesn't work as good for actually learning or teaching. Anyways, so these kids are, huge variety, and a huge variety of parents, of course, like everything. But I had 2 kids over the session that were very unusual, both half-an-hour sessions, which technically I could have 14-minute or 30-minute sessions, and I get paid $8 for the 30-minute sessions. And the one kid was 7 years old, I believe. Boy, can't remember his name. Because they're new students all the time, I don't really see very many regular students with the big company. I don't know their names very well. I probably never have these students again. But he's a boy, 7 years old, and the kid is like some sort of savant. It was like a math prodigy or something. He acted weird too, which is pretty interesting. Well, there's a bunch of stuff there. But so we're reading the story, and it's about like dragons in the woods. Pretty simple story, and he's doing fine at it. He wasn't like extraordinary at his English skill level. But then like he would just throw out random math stuff sometimes, which was really weird. Because I didn't know what to make of it at first. He'd be like, "What's 58 times 6?" And then you'd just like say the answer, and it was hilarious. And I can figure out 58 times 6 in my head, but it takes me a second. The process I would go through would actually be 3 times 50 is 150 times 2 is 300, and then 6 times 8 is 48. 300 plus 48 is 348, right? So that's the process I would go through. But his brain works different. One of the odd mathematical working brains, and he just like thinks of them, and it just makes sense. Like 6 times whatever I was going with, 58. He goes right, and it was just an odd experience with this 7-year-old. So it was kind of cool. So we finished up the story. I try to finish it up fast, especially with the kids that are really good, so we can do whatever we want, especially question sessions, because a lot of the students there don't get an opportunity, especially if they're intelligent, to ask questions, which is really weird. They're just driven hard to answer questions. But when you say, "Hey, you ask me a question," they're like, "What?" They don't do it. They don't get the opportunity to do it. And he was different. He didn't particularly want to ask questions, so we went into math stuff a little bit. And he's 7, right? And so he knew times. He could do multiplication faster than me. We really didn't get into division. He seemed kind of focused on addition and multiplication. He just seemed really excited about them. And I tried some simple addition algebra, and he kind of got it. Like, not quite. It was really interesting, though. Really weird weird experience. It was cool. And then there was a girl who was 9, and her English was perfect. And she had spent the last year in the United States in Boulder, Colorado, turns out, which was very interesting because she kept asking me questions about like Trump and stuff. She wanted me to imitate Trump, actually, which was hilarious. I'm bad at imitations, and I don't watch the news, and I don't watch Trump, and I don't watch any imitations of Trump, so couldn't really do it. Tried, but couldn't really do it. And we talked about a bunch of stuff, and she must have an insanely high IQ too. The amount of stuff that she knew, and she was able to move between subjects very well. So that was a unique experience. Also, those two students were interesting, and she was kind of depressing though. So I run into this every now and then, especially with the students that are really good, because I can talk to them really openly and really fluidly. And I was trying, right, she's 9 years old. I was trying to talk about like what she likes to do for fun and stuff like this. And she said sleep, which you may think would be like an odd answer, like she hasn't fully understood or something like that. But no, she was fully understanding everything. And it kind of got really depressing for a few moments, and that she was like, my parents don't let me sleep because I have to do work. And I was like, oh, yeah. So what exactly does that mean? What kind of work, that type of thing? And she's like, well, school, I'm like, oh. And it's like, tell me about it, trying to draw more out of her. And so she wakes up in the morning, does homework until she goes to school for most of the day, the normal length of the day, and then when she gets home, she does homework for the rest of the day, and then she goes to sleep. So the only part of her day she likes is the sleeping part of the day, which was pretty crazy. And then when I encounter these kids, I try to help them in that I write little reports afterwards on what we went over, what they're doing good on, what they need to improve on, and some homework suggestions. I try to basically just not give out homework, because most of the kids that their parents are paying for private English lessons are already doing so much stuff that and I've talked to quite a few of them about this, that there's no real extra time for just loading on more homework. So I usually add in something like watch a fun movie in English, because that'd be fun. I add in a bunch of other stuff too, but not at the same time. Normally little stuff, but I try to throw in fun stuff like that too, especially if it seems like the kid is overloaded, and that's actually helpful too, so that works out. And so this girl, I added in that she needed to like have fun and be allowed free time and play, because that helps brain development. But then for a homework, she said she really likes dreams. She dreams a lot when she sleeps, and she likes them, but she wasn't very good at remembering them. So I added in that she should try to get in more sleep, and then she could try to write down the dreams that she remembers in English. So to phrase it as like a homework deal. It was so interesting, so weird. So hopefully that helps her. Hopefully her parents let her sleep a little more. It's kind of crazy. It's like really cliche. When she was explaining the whole thing, which is a little bit longer than the way I explained it, it was so cliche. It was kind of weird. Really interesting. And then talking about all these smart kids, which both these kids are probably have naturally higher IQs than I've ever had. I mean, mine's fairly high, but they're way above me. The curve is going to be like a J curve. So, like a lot of distributions. I mean, there's the normal distribution curves, the bell curve, but then J curves are actually more useful in most things, it seems like. So when you get up towards the top, everything starts breaking away. I believe the highest recorded IQ is somewhere in like the 230s, like 234, from the woman whose last name was Savant, which is where we get the word savant from. But there were probably people in history with higher IQs than that. If we look at like Friedrich Nietzsche, I mean, it's hard to overestimate his intelligence. He was really sickly, so the work that he did in those short little like paragraphs. He would write like one paragraph at a time because he couldn't write longer than that. He was so sick. He was a full-fledged professor in philology when he was like 24, which was at a point in history where they didn't even really have full-time professors. Normally you would work the job somewhere and then you were also a professor. He was a full-time professor when he was 24. It is ridiculous stuff. So I believe some people estimate his IQ in like the 260s, but it wasn't tested, obviously, which is insane because that'll probably end up being like twice my IQ, and that I would be in like the 98th percentile. So he would be in like the 99.9999999 percentile. But it's a J curve because that's a huge jump, right? Double between 98 and 99 point whatever is a gigantic jump. So both these kids, especially that girl, is probably way up. The one kid's probably way up on his math scores, but his verbal scores might be a little more normalized, maybe still above normal. It's hard to say. I've been studying for the math, though, the Miller's Analogy Test. That's the IQ test I'm going to take at MSU. I have it scheduled for March 23rd at 3 p.m. I think I'm just going to drive down there and drive back the same day. We'll see how it goes. My mom might go with me, so we'll see. I'm a little worried about it because so I've been doing well on the tests. I've been doing practice tests every day, and that's been going pretty good. And it's all on analogies, of course, just like it sounds. So there's 4 words, but one of them's a blank, and there's some sort of relationship between them, and it could be between words 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, or 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. So for instance, it could be left, right, up, blank. And obviously the answer is down, and it's multiple choice. You get A, B, C, and D. So that helps out quite a bit. You're really just competing against other people, though. It's more of a zero-sum game because they're rating you against other people, not against the test itself. I believe on the Miller's Analogy Test, which all this is proprietary, they keep it to themselves, but if you get 50% of the questions right, you're like in the 60th percentile. So I mean, not like it's great, but most tests a lot of tests you have to get almost everything right to score in the top percentages. So this test is not that case, which is pretty interesting. In all my practice tests, I'm scoring quite a bit above average, but it's hard to say how much because there's not a really good calculation. The time looks like it'll be really easy. You get 30 seconds per question, and there's 120 questions, so it's 60 minutes. Normally, I do most questions in about 8 to 10 seconds, so time should not be an issue at all. But my vernacular will be the limiting factor, my vocabulary basically, because if you don't know what some of the words are, then you're out of luck. And I have a decent vocabulary. I have a really decent vocabulary, but that's been my biggest limiting factor. That and like art stuff, knowing a bunch of names of sculptures and painters and some cultural stuff like that has been a little bit of a limit. I mean, I know some, and I've studied stuff in that direction, but I guess I haven't studied it as much as I could have, or I focused on other things. I focused on the abstract concepts and how they relate to like neurophysiology and that aspect of things, rather than just like the names and the dates of famous cultural historical stuff. From the West, I haven't seen anything come up with Asia so much, so that helps a bit because I'm more familiar with the West. But anyways, that's kind of the update and the plan. I trying to figure out focusing on writing. It's some sort of mental hang-up tied up with me now working more and studying for an IQ test every day and pushing myself in physically. The exercises I've been doing, I've been pushing myself a little bit too. So all those things add up, and I've real logistical constraints. But then also, every time that I've thought about writing, I've gone back to reading, which is really interesting. I have a stack of books that I keep next to me here, actually. These are all books on writing. These are just books on writing, mostly by famous authors, which is pretty interesting. I've been studying that a lot. I gave a speech on the processes of writers. I've been giving a lot of speeches on writing recently, and I compared Stephen King's process to J.K. Rowling's process to Diana Gabaldon's process, who wrote the Outlander series or is writing the Outlander series. And extremely interesting. Diana Gabaldon is really unusual. She has a writing process that I call mosaic because I haven't found any other term for it, and I think that sounds good. And she writes whatever scene she wants in the story. Like, she doesn't even really have it planned out. She just kind of has an idea in her head of the story a little bit. And then, like, scenes seem interesting to her, so she just writes any scene anywhere in the story that seems like it's cool. And then after she has all the scenes, she puts them in order, and bam, you have a book. Really unusual. Plus, her first book, she really didn't intend to be a big book, and she maybe didn't even intend to publish it type of thing, which is why it doesn't fit into a genre very well at all. And genres are mostly artificial constructs, right? They're definitely synthetic or analytic constructs. So they're made for publishing and marketing and retail purposes than anything else. Otherwise, there's not too much of a reason for it other than readers being able to find and buy something. And then Stephen King writes basically like you read. He just starts at the beginning of the story. He doesn't know what's going to happen. Then he starts writing. That's it. He has a whole revision process, right? There's a lot of details to all of them. And then J.K. Rowling planned Harry Potter for 5 years before she started writing. She had the outline of all 7 books before she started writing the first one. Then it took her about a year to write the first one. She did 15 revisions, I believe, of the first one, or she at least did 15 revisions of the first chapter, so multiple major rewrites of the entire book over that year, too. Anyways, Dorothea Brand, I believe is how you say her name. I haven't actually heard it before. Major issue of mine. If you read a lot, sometimes you do not pronounce things correctly. I did that with a lot of philosophers when I was studying Descartes. Looks like it should be Descartes, right? Wittgenstein looks like it should be Wittgenstein. And Goethe looks like it should be Goethe. A bunch of those old philosophers, I pronounced their name wrong for years because I'd only read it and never heard it. But anyways, Dorothea Brand, famous author in like the early 1900s, somewhere in there. I think this was published in like the 1930s. It's a book on writing, 1934. It's really good, Becoming a Writer. It's a lot different. It's not on the craft of writing, like how to make sentences, stories, plots, paragraphs. None of that. It's on like the mentality of being a writer. And she highly recommends that when you're writing, not to read, because she thinks there's kind of an internal mechanism that's causing you to want to write, want to have a narrative, want to explore stories, and she is correct to a large extent. It's an exploratory mechanism mostly that's coming up and wanting or causing you to read or to write. And so if you're satisfying that by reading a bunch of other stories or watching a bunch of stories or anything like that, then you won't have as strong of an urge to write. But I don't want to back off. And people like Stephen King, really compulsive writer, right? A lot of the best writers, really compulsive writers. And I haven't been able to get there, but I have to figure out how to get there. I'm a compulsive reader, so I know I have a compulsive ability, right, or a capacity for compulsion, but I have to turn that into writing somehow. How do you turn on a compulsion? It's a very, very interesting problem. But Stephen King reads for basically the same number of hours that he writes per day, which is several hours each. And that seems like a much better and sustainable program, because a lot of authors, you find out that they don't read that much, more than most people, or possibly even way more than most people, but significantly less than me, or significantly less than I would think. Even like Brandon Sanderson, who's a prolific author, right? He writes a lot. He writes like 2,000, 2,500 words a day, I think is his count, which is cranking it up pretty good. Most famous authors probably average around 1,000. Some some really famous authors averaged around like a sentence a day. If you averaged out their time, some wrote in bursts, some didn't. So there's quite a variety. It's hard to overestimate the variety in writing because reading and writing are not the same at all, right? You can literally write a story backwards. You can start at the end and write to the front. You can start in the middle and move out in either direction. You can start in the front and go to the end. You can do it in random spots and splice it together. You can plan it, not plan it. There's a lot of variety. You can't really overestimate it. And then there's the whole revision process, and there's a lot to it. So it's a lot different. Whereas reading, there's basically one way to read a story, in that you start at the beginning and you start, and then you read into this unknown. But that is not so with writing at all. So to a large extent, I have to find my process, which is why I've been studying these. I have about 13 writers, 13 famous writers that I'm interested in their processes, and I've studied maybe a couple of dozen, maybe a few dozen, but there's 13 of them that are interesting to me, kind of unique. So I'll probably write an article on it soon. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, that conversion process of like turning compulsive reading into compulsive writing, but keeping the reading because I don't want to give up the reading at all, is a unique, interesting little psychological problem. So I'm gonna play with that. But finances are right on top right now because without money you cannot live to write. so it's a major issue. All right. Anyways, I've pontificated long enough. I just thought those students were interesting. That's what actually got me open on this. So, but those are all my major updates for now, I do believe. Until next time, peace.